The 10,118th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the situation in the Middle East. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Cyprus, Israel, Lebanon, and the Syrian Arab Republic to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs. Good morning. Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations. Mr. Tom Fletcher, Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. And Ms. Lynn Harfouche, Executive Committee Member of the Lebanese National Bloc Party. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo. Thank you. Good morning.
Mr. President, amid an already devastating escalation in the Middle East, the decision by Hizbullah to attack Israel on 2 March has again drawn Lebanon into a conflict it neither sought nor can afford. In violation of Security Council Resolution 1701, Hizbullah has since fired hundreds of projectiles, including rockets, missiles, and drones, from Lebanon into Israel and the occupied Syrian Golan. It has also warned those living south of the Blue Line to evacuate. Israel, in turn, has carried out extensive strikes in southern Beirut, across southern Lebanon, and in the Bekaa and Baalbek regions. These operations have reportedly killed over 570 people and left over 1,400 injured, according to the Lebanese government. Israel has also issued evacuation notices for these areas, triggering the displacement of over 500,000 people and creating yet another acute humanitarian emergency. Undersecretary General Tom Fletcher will brief you in more detail in this regard. The renewed violence across the Blue Line has largely erased the progress achieved in recent months to consolidate the cessation of hostilities. It also jeopardizes Lebanon's tradition of coexistence as fear and uncertainty heighten their intercommunal tensions. As the Secretary General previously reported, although the cessation of hostilities reached in November 2024 did not completely end the preceding violence, it brought substantial respite. Following the cessation of hostilities, the state of Lebanon also took historic and courageous steps to fulfill its obligations under Resolutions 1701 and 1559. In August, the government tasked the Lebanese armed forces with developing a plan to establish exclusive state control over weapons. And in January, the Lebanese armed forces announced that they had assumed operational control over the South Litani sector. Furthermore, civilian representatives from both parties participated in 2 meetings of the cessation of hostilities mechanism in December, a modest but meaningful step toward dialogue. Nevertheless, significant challenges persisted. Hizbullah refused to cooperate with the government's efforts to extend state authority throughout Lebanon and establish a monopoly over the possession and use of arms. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces maintained positions north of the Blue Line at 5 locations and 2 so-called buffer zones, while also conducting near-daily strikes on alleged Hizbullah and other non-state armed groups in Lebanon. Still, The progress achieved since November 2024 underscores the fact that security and stability for the people of Lebanon and Israel are attainable. It is vital to build on these advances, not squander them. It was therefore encouraging that on 9 March, President Aoun affirmed Lebanon's readiness to engage in direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices, with the aim of achieving a complete truce. He also proposed that the Lebanese armed forces, upon receiving urgent logistical support, would immediately take control of areas of tensions, confiscating all weapons and dismantling Hizbullah infrastructure. Prime Minister Salam has likewise reiterated Lebanon's commitment to achieving a state monopoly on arms. On 2 March, in condemning Hizbullah's actions, he affirmed the government's complete rejection of any military activity outside the scope of legitimate state institutions and reaffirmed the state's full authority over war and peace decisions. In a landmark statement, he announced the cabinet's decision prohibiting Hizbullah's military and security activities and mandating the immediate handover of weapons, tasking the Lebanese state security forces with the enforcement of this decision. These declarations have been accompanied by concrete measures. The Lebanese army has reported the detention of approximately 26 Lebanese nationals, including Hizbullah members, and 1 Palestinian, all for the illegal possession of weapons and ammunition. Judicial rulings have been passed down against some of the Hizbullah members arrested. Separately, on 5 March, the Lebanese government declared a ban on the activities of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in Lebanon and revoked visa-free entry for Iranian citizens. Mr. President, while more hard work will prove critical, such statements and actions are significant. They reflect a clear resolve of the Lebanese state, and they warrant the full support of this Council. The United Nations remains firmly committed to assisting all parties in meeting their responsibilities. To enable Lebanon to fulfill its obligations under Resolutions 1559 and 1701, an immediate de-escalation and cessation of violence is imperative. Hizbullah must cease its attacks on Israel and cooperate with the government's efforts to assert full state authority and establish a monopoly over weapons. Israel must halt its military campaign in Lebanon and withdraw its forces from Lebanese territory. The sovereignty and territorial integrity of both Lebanon and Israel must be upheld. All parties must respect their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must never be targeted. United Nations personnel must be protected. And the international community must scale up its support to the Lebanese state security services, particularly the Lebanese armed forces, to ensure they have the capacity and resources they critically require. The Secretary General continues to engage with member states to press for an end to this conflict. The Special Coordinator for Lebanon has been in contact with all relevant actors, including through a visit to Israel earlier this week, to advocate urgently for de-escalation and dialogue. As Undersecretary General Lacroix will report, UNIFIL peacekeepers remain in position along the Blue Line, often at great risk. To prevent further loss of life and to create the space for meaningful political engagement, violence must stop. Only then can the parties resume the difficult but indispensable work of building a stable and secure future for both Lebanon and Israel. We will continue to work closely with all concerned to restore calm and protect civilians. Our objective is straightforward: a return to a situation in which commitments under Resolutions 1559 and 1701 can be pursued in a credible and sustainable manner. This is a moment that requires restraint, responsibility, and a willingness to prioritize the well-being of the populations who bear the brunt of these hostilities. The United Nations stands ready to assist, but the decisions that shape the coming days must be guided by a collective recognition that further escalation benefits no one. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the Security Council. As you just heard from Under Secretary General DiCarlo, the fragile situation that prevails since November 2024 has given way to a significant and dangerous escalation of hostilities. We are gravely concerned that there will be a further worsening of the situation in Lebanon and in the region. In this dangerous and precarious environment, UNIFIL remains on the ground, implementing its mandate as far as the security circumstances allow. Since the 2nd of March, when Hizbullah claimed responsibility for an attack on Israel, the group has carried out daily strikes across the Blue Line, including with rockets, missiles, and drones at targets in Israel and the occupied Syrian Golan. Many rockets have been launched from south of the Litani River, which demonstrates the presence of unauthorized armed personnel, assets, and weapons south of the Litani River, in clear violation of Resolution 1701. The Israel Defense Forces have issued displacement orders for the entire UNIFIL area of operations and intensified daily strikes, impacting multiple locations in the UNIFIL area of operations, also in violation of Resolution 1701. Since the 1st of March, UNIFIL has reported some 4,120 trajectories, including 2,733 from south to north of the Blue Line and 323 air attacks by the Israel Defense Forces. In the same period, UNIFIL has recorded 1,387 trajectories from north to south. Notably, each trajectory may represent multiple projectiles, and UNIFIL cannot detect some projectiles, such as those fired by portable anti-tank launchers or light weapons. On the 9th of March alone, UNIFIL recorded 159 air violations, the highest number observed in a 24-hour period since the resumption of hostilities. The Israel Defense Forces have also reinforced the 5 positions at which they have maintained a presence north of the Blue Line. UNIFIL has observed incursion by the Israeli Defense Forces units into Lebanon at several locations, including through Yarun in Sector West and Hula, Khiam, and Markaba in Sector East. On the 9th of March, one Israel Defense Forces tank was observed near Kunin in southeast Lebanon, 7 kilometers north of the Blue Line. Direct clashes between Hezbollah and Israeli Defense Forces inside Lebanon have been reported, including in Hula and Khiam on the 4th of March. Extensive buildup of Israeli military assets south of the Blue Line also continues to be reported. There have been several incidents that have jeopardized the safety and security of our peacekeepers. On the 6th of March, peacekeepers from the Ghanaian contingent were severely injured inside their base in Al-Kawza, Sector West. He is currently being treated at a hospital in Beirut and is now in a serious but stable condition. Several other peacekeepers were injured less seriously, while the base was heavily damaged in the resulting fires. We obviously wish a speedy recovery to all involved. A UNIFIL investigation is ongoing, including to determine the origin of the projectiles or munitions that impact the UN position. On the 7th of March, an Israel Defense Forces tank stopped in front of a UNIFIL observation post near Markaba in Sector East. Subsequently, the peacekeepers heard multiple rounds of small arms fire, and 2 of the post's perimeter lights were damaged. On the 8th of March, 2 loud explosions were heard near a UNIFIL headquarters in Nakura. Debris consistent with a drone or a rocket, as well as remnants of an Iron Dome interception, fell inside the UNIFIL camp. No injuries were reported. Mr. President, our peacekeepers have remained in position in line with the mandate this Council has provided while continuously reassessing the force's posture against prevailing risks. UNIFIL continues to maintain constant contact with the parties to avoid misunderstandings, deconflict, and de-escalate where possible. All parties bear a clear and unequivocal responsibility to ensure the safety and security of UN peacekeepers. We call on all actors on the ground to uphold this obligation and to refrain from any action that endangers UNIFIL peacekeepers. With the ongoing exchanges of fire severely restricting their movements, UNIFIL's current focus includes ensuring safety of its personnel and helping facilitate humanitarian access to affected communities in the area. UNIFIL has supported the local community in line with its protection of civilians mandate, transporting dozens of civilians to safety from several villages in southern Lebanon, including children, older persons, and persons with disabilities, in close coordination with local authorities. On the 7th of March, UNIFIL assisted in evacuating 3 families from Sarda in Sector East. On the 10th of March, at the request of the municipality of Alma al-Shab in Sector West, UNIFIL facilitated the safe movement of around 80 civilians who wished to leave the area. Peacekeepers have largely been confined to their bases, with some spending significant periods of time in shelter, which seriously impedes UNIFIL's freedom of movement and limits the mission's monitoring and reporting ability. Troop rotations are currently suspended. This security environment has also presented challenges for the resupply of fuel, food, and water for UN positions. Roadblocks erected by the Israel Defense Forces have restricted access to a number of our positions. The UNIFIL head of mission and force commander, General Abanyara, is coordinating closely with the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, who is the designated official for security for all United Nations personnel in Lebanon. Program Essential UNIFIL civilian personnel have been moved to reside in UNIFIL headquarters at Nakura. Other international civilian personnel are relocating out of the South Litani sector, in some cases out of Lebanon. The mission is assisting our national colleagues who wish to relocate to the North Litani sector. Mr. President, the Lebanese armed forces had made significant efforts since the cessation of hostilities in November 2024, steadily reinforcing their presence in the south and progressively extending their deployment along the Blue Line. We commend these efforts, which represented an important step towards the full implementation of Resolution 1701. However, in the face of the current hostilities, the Lebanese armed forces have had to temporarily relocate some 20 kilometers north of the Blue Line. Mr. President, as noted by Under-Secretary General DiCarlo, and as you will hear in more detail from Under-Secretary General Tom Fletcher, the heavy exchanges of fire have most tragically had the greatest impact on civilians on both sides of the Blue Line, with many casualties and hundreds of thousands displaced in Lebanon. In southern Lebanon, the humanitarian situation continues to worsen, with IDP shelters reporting near full occupancy and lacking means to meet basic needs. UNIFIL's liaison and coordination team has continued its close engagement with the Lebanese Armed Forces and Israel Defense Forces, seeking to de-escalate and facilitate humanitarian missions. In the past week, UNIFIL has facilitated dozens of missions by the Lebanese Red Cross. In the interest of the safety of both peacekeepers and civilians, we urge the parties to commit to active deconfliction through this channel. To those member states contributing troops to UNIFIL, we extend our most sincere gratitude. The continued united commitment of the troop contributing countries, as well as the support of this Council, is crucial. I express solidarity with and pride in the men and women of UNIFIL, again on the front lines. Only a political solution will bring lasting stability to Lebanon and the region. We urge all parties to recommit to the full implementation of Resolution 1701 and to engage constructively toward that end. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Lacroix for his briefing, and I now give the floor to Mr. Tom Fletcher.
Mr. President, Ambassador Bartos, Excellencies, this is a moment of grave peril for Lebanon and for the region, for all of us. Too many warning lights are flashing. Actions have consequences. Lebanon's particular place on the map and in history means that tremors in geopolitics ricochet through it like earthquakes. So when the world turns away from international law and human solidarity, Lebanon shakes. When the world pulls apart, when the splintering of the international order is cheered on by those who believe the rules do not apply to them, or that they can take risks with the lives of others, when leaders feel unrestrained and the rules are in retreat, when the gains of decades are precarious, when technology and killing form an increasingly deadly alliance, and when the scaffolding for coexistence is under sustained, deliberate attack, then Lebanon shakes. As a result of the region's latest war, and following months of violence, we've watched the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon intensify with alarming speed, with civilians on both sides of the blue line once again paying the heaviest price. Casualties continue to mount. Over 570 people reported killed, over 1,400 injured since the 2nd of March. Mass displacement is accelerating, with over 750,000 people now registered with the government of Lebanon as on the move. In addition, almost 84,000 Syrians and more than 8,000 Lebanese have crossed into Syria since the 2nd of March. We're seeing large-scale movements into densely populated urban areas where shelter capacity is already overstretched. More than 120,000 people, including thousands of children, are now in 580 collective centers. And as you heard earlier, these sites are overcrowded, with inadequate sanitation, insufficient essential supplies. These conditions heighten risks of harassment, sexual violence, exploitation, abuse, trafficking, particularly, of course, for women and girls. The people of Lebanon have, of course, already endured extensive displacement and damage to homes and livelihoods, infrastructure, and essential public services during the 2023 to 24 escalation, compounding the impact of the financial and economic collapse experienced since 2019. At the same time, the escalation is pushing an already fragile education system deeper into crisis. Schools have been forced to close to serve as temporary shelters, disrupting learning for tens of thousands of children. Overcrowded shelters are also raising the risk of disease, while psychosocial trauma, an acute aspect of this crisis since the 2024 escalation, is being compounded. As these health needs rise, hostilities have forced the closure of 49 primary healthcare centers and 5 hospitals in the south and in Beirut's southern suburbs. Since 28th of February, the World Health Organization has recorded 25 attacks on healthcare, resulting in 16 deaths and 29 injuries among health workers and patients. The protection of healthcare is paramount. Mr. President, the United Nations and the broader humanitarian community are fully mobilized to complement government-led efforts. Along with local organizations and women-led groups, we will do all we can to reach those most in need. We and our partners have provided over 500,000 hot meals, distributed over 270,000 liters of bottled water, provided hygiene items and household supplies, and 123,000 liters of fuel to sustain critical services. Our rapid response teams are delivering life-saving supplies in shelters. 125 health sector-supported mobile primary healthcare units are providing services too. Child protection, psychosocial support are also being expanded, alongside preparations for emergency cash assistance for vulnerable children and families. In close coordination with the government of Lebanon, a 3-month hyper-prioritized flash appeal will be launched in Beirut later this week. This emergency scale-up comes on top of existing humanitarian programs under the 2026 Lebanon Response Plan. I will support these efforts with a rapid response allocation of $15 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund to help scale up life-saving work. Additional funds will be released through a reserve allocation from the Lebanon Humanitarian Fund. But our ability to reach people is tightening by the day. Large areas of South Lebanon, the Bekaa, and Beirut's southern suburbs remain active conflict zones. Debris and unexploded ordnance are blocking roads to affected villages, and key transport routes, including those linking the Bekaa, have been repeatedly disrupted. Population movements are shifting quickly and increasingly difficult to track. Of course, Lebanon's latest humanitarian crisis is just one more consequence of a regional war that is spiraling out of control. War does not stay neatly within borders. It tears through markets, supply chains, food prices. And when that happens, the most vulnerable people in Lebanon and across the region are hit first and hardest. When maritime corridors such as the Strait of Hormuz are disrupted, food, health, energy become more expensive and harder to access. Impact on food security is already evident in Gaza, where the price of flour is up by 270%. Global shipping costs have increased 16% compared to this time last year. We anticipate delays of 6 months in the delivery of supplies across multiple humanitarian responses. Airspace closures are also disrupting our humanitarian missions across the region. So we are pre-positioning stocks, activating alternative supply routes to keep life-saving aid moving to Lebanon and, of course, across the region. But as the Secretary General insisted and USG DiCarlo underlined, we need the protection of civilians, de-escalation, an immediate cessation of hostilities, and genuine dialogue and negotiations towards a peaceful settlement, in line with the Charter of the United Nations. As ever, I close with 3 asks of the Security Council. First, civilians, all civilians throughout the region must be protected and their access to life-saving help ensured. Constant care must be taken to spare civilians and civilian infrastructure, hospitals, water sources, schools, energy, at all times and by all parties. Humanitarians and humanitarian premises must be protected and our movements to provide aid facilitated. Today has been another tragic day for our humanitarian family. We're seeing civilians, including humanitarian workers, under attack across the region, in Lebanon, the occupied Palestinian territory, in Israel, in Iran, in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, in United Arab Emirates, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan, Syria, Oman, and beyond. Second, we need generous funding for a principled, scaled-up humanitarian response. We must be supported to go wherever the needs are in the region. I have reaffirmed our readiness to help civilians in Lebanon, Iran, the occupied Palestinian territory, in Israel, or any other countries as needed. Humanitarian action is always harder in times of war, but this is, of course, when it is most needed. So we count on member states to help ensure that this life-saving work continues in the Middle East and beyond across the global humanitarian crisis. And yet we're seeing staggering amounts of money, reportedly $1 billion a day spent on destruction, while some politicians boast of cutting aid to those in gravest danger globally. With a fraction of this money, we can save millions of lives globally. Thirdly, and finally, we need a revival of strategic, calm, rational, hopeful diplomacy. We need calmer heads to prevail. Peacemaking is hard, but it is always better, and it takes more courage than the alternative. Every time you hear the powerful attack the UN, ask yourself what they gained by weakening us. And yet, we're seeing a sustained attack against the systems meant to restrain states from reckless warfare, a pattern of attrition against international law and humanitarian principles. Politicians flexing their muscles by sending others to die. As conflicts spread, the international system pulls further apart and more resources flow towards weapons, not saving lives. So a simple test for your actions. If your opponent were doing this to you, what would you say? Let's have the courage to recommit instead to lasting peace sustained stability, dependable governance, and international law. Mr. President, Excellencies, Lebanon is exhausted by other people's wars. It is not asking for help, but for oxygen. Its people can defy the history, the geography, even the politics. They can be stronger than the forces pulling them apart. But they can only do that if Iran and Israel stop fighting their wars in Lebanon. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Mr. Fletcher for his briefing, and I now give the floor to Ms. Lynn Harfouche.
Mr. President, members of the Security Council, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. My name is Lynn Harfouche. I am a Lebanese political activist from the city of Baalbek. I grew up in the Bekaa and spent much of my life in Beirut's southern suburbs. Today, like many families, mine too is displaced. In the early hours of last Monday morning, while Lebanese families slept in their homes, Hizbullah once again dragged our country into a war the Lebanese people did not choose. This decision was not taken by the state. It was imposed by a militia that answers to interests beyond the Lebanese borders. For many Lebanese, this is a tragic cycle we know too well. I am 34 years old and I've known nothing but Hizbullah's hegemony in my community. I myself grew up supporting them. In 2006, they entered a war by kidnapping Israeli soldiers at the borders. My neighborhood got razed by Israeli bombs. I was 14 then and saw Hizbullah as our protectors, even as I was displayed on a traumatizing night. But coming back to our neighborhood, I found our livelihood destroyed. Suffocated by yellow flags claiming a divine victory. Seeing them celebrate over our collective ruin, while their grip on our streets only tightened. I felt they were occupying our wreckage to secure their own dominance. The mask fell and I saw the truth. The truth that resistance was a mere facade to exploit an entire country for an expansionist project. The truth that Hizbullah seeks to break us away from other communities through its ideological and social project. The truth that under Hizbullah's dominance, Iran's arm in Lebanon, war becomes a recurring reality, fear our constant companion, and our lives a mere expendable for the sake of the supreme leader. The terrible part in all of this is the very same scenario played again in 2023, when Hizbullah decided to open what they called the support front against Israel right after October 7th. And again in 2026, after they had promised the Lebanese government they would not commit suicide once more. And Israel's military response to Hizbullah, on the other hand, has resulted in mass displacement and destruction. Hundreds of Lebanese have been killed in the past week. As I speak, thousands of Israeli soldiers are massed at our southern border, and we Lebanese fear that the conflict can only widen further. We are trapped in this unending war of access. Who pays the price? Not the men who deliver speeches about resistance from protected bunkers, but the mother carrying 2 sleeping children down the stairs at 1 a.m, but the elderly in Baalbek, the families in Nabatiyeh, and all the displaced now sleeping in cars, sidewalks, or in overcrowded shelters. According to latest figures, the number of internally displaced people has reached almost 1 million, including nearly 200,000 now living in collective shelters across hundreds of sites. For a country already battered by economic collapse, this is a disaster, one that needs to be addressed urgently by helping the Lebanese government. Yet, the answer to this humanitarian crisis cannot only be humanitarian. It needs to be political. At its core, Lebanon's crisis is one of sovereignty, accountability, and a weakened state. No society can rebuild, no economy can recover, and no youth can build a future when a country's fate is controlled by a suicidal fraction. Mr. President, members of the Security Council, I was raised in the very environment from which Hizbullah claims its legitimacy. I know its language. I know its threats. I know the fear it creates when people are told that silence is loyalty and obedience is dignity. But there is no dignity in radicalizing entire communities to serve Iran's theocratic regime through its doctrine, Wilayat al-Faqih. There is no honor in making Lebanese children pay the higher price. There is no resistance in holding an entire nation hostage. I am here to tell you that millions of Lebanese, including many Shiites, want a different future. I also speak to you today as a mother of two boys, Hadi, who is 11, and Ray, who is 6 years old. On the night the Israeli bombing intensified, Ray woke up trembling in the middle of the night and asked me a question that many children are asking. Mom, why do we keep going to wars when more people will die? Why can't we live in peace? I did not have an easy answer, but I will tell you this. Governments that normalized Hezbollah were all accomplices in where we are today. For years, the world looked the other way, privileging their dealing with Iran. For years, they treated an illegal non-state actor as a political reality, to be managed rather than a violation to be ended. For years, the world asked us to tolerate intolerance. Simultaneously, the Lebanese feel helpless and alone in the face of Israel's aggression. Dismissing international law, the global community has validated the rule of the strongest. This double standard has turned Lebanon into a graveyard for the very principles this council was built to uphold. We were told that accepting this parallel reality was the price of stability. But look at where that fragile stability has led us and the whole region. Today, I speak in the name of most Lebanese when I say, we don't want this stability. We want a solution. What is common sense and minimum norms of living in your countries are still a matter of discussion and disagreements in mine. Although for decades, the international community has outlined the framework needed to address this problem. Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701 clearly affirm that there must be no weapons outside the authority of the Lebanese state, and that armed militias must be disarmed. These resolutions are not abstract principles. They are the internationally recognized roadmap for restoring stability and state authority in Lebanon. But they failed, and they failed because of the recklessness of some and the false promises of others. Today, the Lebanese government has begun to take important steps in this direction. Decisions have been made to outlaw unauthorized military and security activities of Hezbollah. Today, there is a growing recognition within the Lebanese institutions to reclaim the monopoly of arms and with it, national decision-making. At the center of this effort stands the Lebanese armed forces. The Lebanese armed forces are the sole legitimate defender of the country. Their success is not only a Lebanese priority. It is the only viable path to preventing Lebanon from becoming a permanent gray zone of proxy warfare in the region. Help them disarm Hezbollah and prevent Iranian interference and dominance, and protect our Lebanese borders from Israeli invasion. Supporting the Lebanese armed forces should therefore not be viewed as charity or assistance. It is an investment in regional stability. A couple of days ago, our president and prime minister launched a diplomatic initiative towards Israel. They laid the ground to the only solution to this war, ending the daily Israeli aggressions, obtaining their total withdrawal from our land, and allowing our people to return to their homes, while guaranteeing Hizbullah's disarmament. They even went further by suggesting to end the 80-year-old state of war between Lebanon and Israel. Because we Lebanese want to live in peace. Because we Lebanese deserve peace. A sustainable peace based on justice that would allow us to have a future, to have a life, a simple one, without fear, in which we can aim for our prosperity and well-being like other people. A life to live, not only to survive. Lebanon, Mr. President, is not a mere geographic entity for this council to manage. It is a founding member of the United Nations that contributed to drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's an idea of liberty and diversity that shouldn't fail, that cannot fail. Mr. President, members of the Council, I wish I could have been personally with you today, so I can look in the eyes of those who played a role in this turmoil and tell them what our ambassador Ghassan Touaini once said in the same room in 1978. Let my people live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harfouch, for your courage and for that important briefing. And I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. France requested this meeting due to this dramatic and urgent situation, together with Bahrain, Denmark, Greece, Latvia, the DRC, and the UK. I thank you for convening it, and I thank the USG for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, the USG for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and the USG for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, for their briefings, as well as Ms. Lynn Harfouch for Lebanese Civil Society. We support their participation in this debate. We welcome Lebanon, Israel, Syria, and Cyprus to our debate. President, war has once again reached Lebanon. Hezbollah has made the unacceptable and irresponsible decision to join the Iranian attacks against Israel over 10 days ago, dragging Lebanon into a conflict in which the Lebanese authorities and people refuse to be involved. The population is paying the highest price, with over 500 deaths on the Lebanese side, hundreds of wounded, and 750,000 displaced persons caused by Israeli military operations and the evacuation orders. On the Israeli side, a number of wounded, and the people have been forced to take refuge several times per day in shelters. This is not acceptable. France fully supports Lebanese government and their courageous decision on March 2nd of prohibiting absolutely all military and security activities by Hezbollah. We call on the government to immediately implement these critical decisions. Hezbollah must immediately end its attacks against Israel and lay down its arms. It must stop taking Lebanese people hostage for a war led by Tehran against Israel. For its part, Israel must respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Lebanon and cease all large-scale land interventions and lasting occupation of the Lebanese territory. History shows that this will only serve as a breeding ground for new instability rather than lasting peace. Civilians, whether they are Lebanese or Israeli, should never be targeted. The rules of international humanitarian law govern the conduct of hostilities, especially the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution. And adherence to these rules is crucial to ensure the protection of civilian populations and infrastructure under all circumstances. Deliberate attacks against UNIFIL are unacceptable. France condemns in the strongest terms the attack of March 6, 2026, in which 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers were injured. Express our condolences to Ghana. Protecting peacekeepers must be guaranteed in all circumstances and by all parties. In this difficult context, France commends the courage, professionalism, and commitment of UNIFIL personnel, as well as personnel from all of the TCCs. President, war is not inevitable. Diplomacy is possible. We continue our exchanges, including through the President of the Republic, with Lebanese authorities and Israeli authorities to arrive at de-escalation. We support the efforts of mediation of the UN. The path to follow is clear to fully implement the ceasefire agreement of November 26, 2024, and Resolution 1701 of the Security Council, and also continue to be guided by the mechanism established in November 2024. This has been supported by the parties and will allow us to stabilize the situation throughout the blue line, provide security guarantees to both countries, and restore the territorial integrity of Lebanon. In this vein, we support the proposal of President Aoun to relaunch direct negotiations between Lebanon and Israel. At the same time, we must collectively aid the Lebanese people, to whom we express our full solidarity. France is fully mobilized to achieve this goal. We have already provided emergency aid of 6 million euros to humanitarian organizations that are present on site, including the High Commissioner for Refugees, and we support the UN's humanitarian commitment. France will allow the delivery of several dozen tons of humanitarian cargo very soon, including medicines. In addition, France is financing the implementation of projects on the ground to meet the essential needs of the populations that have been displaced. These projects are part of the efforts of the Lebanese government to respond to the crisis. Lastly, it is crucial to step up support to the Lebanese armed forces, whose mission in this difficult context is to pursue the disarmament of Hizbullah. France announced the delivery of armored vehicles to the Lebanese armed forces to support them in this mission. France remains staunchly committed to the sovereignty and stability of Lebanon and will be holding in Paris as soon as possible an international conference to strengthen the Lebanese armed forces. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I thank Under-Secretary Generals De Carlo, Lacroix, and Fletcher for briefing us today, as well as Ms. Harfouche for your powerful testimony. I also welcome the participation of the permanent representatives of Lebanon and other countries of the region in our meeting. President, the United Kingdom joined the call for this meeting alongside European and other partners to address the serious escalation of violence across the Blue Line and in Lebanon. We strongly condemn Lebanese Hezbollah's ongoing attacks against Israel and the region, which must cease. These actions, on behalf of the Iranian regime, have cost lives and have once again drawn Lebanese civilians into a conflict they do not want. As we heard from the briefers today, the escalating violence has already had a devastating impact on civilians on both sides of the Blue Line. We do not want to see a widening conflict in Lebanon. We are concerned by the civilian impact of Israeli military action in Lebanon, including large-scale displacement. Access to essential and life-saving medical services is also becoming much more difficult, as we heard, with 5 hospitals reportedly closed due to the fighting. We call upon Israel to uphold its obligations under international law, including with regard to protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. The United Kingdom is working closely with the Lebanese government and humanitarian partners to support those affected by the current escalation. President, the United Kingdom expresses its strong support to UNIFIL and urges respect for the mission's freedom of movement as it implements its mandate. We are deeply concerned by the 6 March strike on UNIFIL, which seriously injured several Ghanaian peacekeepers. I take this opportunity to express our hopes for their swift and full recovery from their injuries. We once again underscore that attacks on peacekeepers are completely unacceptable, and we urge all parties to ensure the safety and security of UNIFIL personnel in accordance with international law. In closing, the United Kingdom welcomes President Aoun's call for direct negotiations between the governments of Israel and Lebanon. We encourage both governments to engage diplomatically and work towards de-escalation and full implementation of Resolution 1701. We also commend the decision by the Lebanese government to ban all Hezbollah's military activities. We continue to support the Lebanese armed forces as the sole legitimate armed force in Lebanon. Expansion of the conflict across the Blue Line is in no one's interest and risks further destabilizing Lebanon and exacerbating the regional crisis. We are committed to playing a full diplomatic role in efforts to secure lasting peace and security for the people of Lebanon and the people of Israel. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank the three Undersecretary Generals for their sobering updates and Ms. Hafouche for important messages. Mr. President, the situation in the Middle East is extremely fragile. At this time of heightened tension, any escalation carries serious risk for regional peace and security. That is why Denmark was part of the call for this emergency meeting, together with France, Greece, Latvia, and the United Kingdom. Our message today is simple. There is an urgent need to de-escalate and to resume the cessation of hostilities agreement. Hezbollah's action risks dragging Lebanon into a broader regional war against the will and interest of the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people. We strongly condemn Hezbollah's decision to attack Israel and their support for Iran, and we call for all those attacks to cease immediately. On its part, Israel must exercise the right to self-defense in accordance with international law and abstain from further escalating the situation. We urge Israel to withdraw its forces from occupied areas in Lebanon in line with the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. We call for respect for Lebanese sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence in line with Resolution 1701. This will also allow for a gradual establishment and control by the Lebanese armed forces in southern Lebanon, paving the way for the exclusive state control with arms in the country. As a result of the recent outbreak of hostilities, in the past week alone, more than 550 Lebanese civilians have been killed. Denmark underlines that all parties must respect international law, including international humanitarian law, and that protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure must be ensured. Over 700,000 civilians have been forced to evacuate, creating large waves of internally displaced within Lebanon. Thousands more have crossed into Syria. All of those places additional strain on Lebanon, whose people have already suffered from large-scale economic and humanitarian challenges as a result of decades of conflict, mismanagement, external interference, and regional instability. A strong, stable, and secure Lebanon would contribute to Israel's safety. This can only materialize, however, if the parties focus on de-escalation and dialogue, and it requires that Hezbollah stops its attacks. Mr. President, Lebanese society has historically been, and remains to this day, a mosaic of diversity. This diversity is a distinct strength. However, it must remain so. In the past decade, Lebanon has shown immense generosity and resilience in housing more than 1 million refugees from neighboring Syria. New massive waves of internal displacement carry the risk of sectarian strife. This must be avoided at all costs. We urge the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people to prioritize national unity and social cohesion in the face of the current conflict. The Lebanese government has also shown courage and will to take on historic challenges, and even if much remains to be done, progress has been made in disarming Hezbollah and implementing economic reforms. the current conflict risks rolling back these positive steps. Mr. President, against this backdrop, UNIFIL's presence in southern Lebanon is more important than ever. We fully support UNIFIL in exercising the task mandated by this Council and recall that peacekeepers are protected by international law. Reports of attacks on UNIFIL personnel are deeply worrying, and our thoughts go to the wounded Ghanaian peacekeepers. Any deliberate targeting of peacekeepers is unacceptable. The current volatile situation only underscored the need for UNIFIL and for a strong and continuous UN presence in Lebanon, including after UNIFIL's drawdown by December 2026. Mr. President, in closing, Lebanon must not become another front in an already dangerous and volatile regional landscape. Its people, who have already suffered for so much and so long, must not be dragged into another man-made humanitarian emergency. We call on all actors to step back from the brink and return to negotiations and peaceful dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to begin by thanking the United States, the presidents of this Council, for convening this meeting on such a short notice. And Latvia also joined the call for this meeting to take place. I thank the USG DiCarlo, USG Fletcher, and USG Lacroix for their briefings. And I also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her insights. The current escalation in Lebanon has serious consequences for the civilian populations and for the security of UN peacekeepers, as well as the stability of the region and global security. And we commend the exceptional service of UNIFIL as it continues to carry out its mandate under Resolution 1701, monitoring this conflict even in the direst circumstances. All essential personnel, including those from my country, are still remaining in place in the midst of hostilities. Mr. President, Hizbullah has chosen to attack Israel in support of Iran and has dragged the people of Lebanon into a conflict they have no part in. And it brings more suffering to the civilian population and endangers the fragile progress of the Lebanese government attempting to assert state control over its territory. Hezbollah's escalation is part of the pattern, as Iran consistently uses proxy networks to destabilize the Middle East, attacks countries in the region, and enables aggression in Europe. And it must stop now. Hezbollah must immediately disarm and stop all actions against Israel, but we commend the Lebanese government's decision of 2nd March to declare all Hezbollah military and security activities illegal in the whole territory of Lebanon. As Lebanon's Prime Minister, Nawaf Salam, has warned of a looming humanitarian crisis, and we heard also from our briefers, with more than 700 persons forcibly displaced and more than 870 people lacking basic supplies. We strongly reiterate the vital need for all sides to respect international humanitarian law. With over 500 people killed, we call on all parties to ensure adherence to principles of proportionality and distinction of civilian objects. While we recognize Israel's right to self-defense, our concern lies with the human cost that is already piling high with Israel's operations against Hezbollah, including in densely populated areas. We urge the cessation of all hostilities and return to the ceasefire. We call for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon to be respected, as reflected in Resolution 1701 and the UN Charter. The safety and security of UN personnel and property must be respected by all sides and at all times. We call upon all members of this Council to continue stressing the crucial importance of upholding commitments agreed in Security Council Resolutions 2518 and 2730. Latvia, as UNIFIL troop contributing country, is especially distressed by the fact that amidst heavy firing, 3 UNIFIL peacekeepers from Ghana were injured inside their base in South Lebanon, and our thoughts are with the injured, and we wish them speedy recovery. The current escalation only reiterates the need for a long-term solution of this conflict, and it is essential that the withdrawal of UNIFIL does not result in a security vacuum. We welcome the political commitment of the Lebanese government to extend its authority throughout the country and the implementation of the disarmament plan. And the continued international support in these efforts remains essential. And we continue to stand by Lebanon and its people. And we look forward to the UN Secretary-General report in June and Council's continued work on solutions for providing security support of Lebanon. Mr. President, we commend all mediation efforts, and it is important that Security Council supports these processes in any way possible. We cannot allow the progress that Lebanon has achieved over the past 20 years to vanish. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wish to thank today's briefers, USGs DiCarlo, Lacroix, and Fletcher for their thorough remarks. I also wish to thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her compelling message. I welcome the presence of the permanent representatives of Lebanon, Israel, the Syrian Arab Republic, and Cyprus in today's meeting. Greece, alongside France, Denmark, Latvia, and the UK, called for today's briefing due to the dangerous escalation in Lebanon, and an escalation which bears serious consequences for the civilian population and for UNIFIL peacekeepers. Mr. President, Lebanon is the victim of a war it did not choose. We strongly condemn the attacks of Hezbollah acting in support of Iran against Israel, which triggered this round of escalation. Hezbollah constitutes a threat to regional stability. Hezbollah has no right to unilaterally drag the Lebanese people into misery and despair. The Lebanese state is the sole legitimate authority which can conduct military operations and define Lebanon's foreign relations. Hezbollah must disarm immediately and stop all actions against Israel. In the midst of these developments, we welcome and commend the decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to ban Hezbollah's military activities. The resolve of the Lebanese leadership to extend its exclusive control over arms is clear. It should be given a chance to bring security and prosperity to Lebanon. We should all be standing by their side. Its steadfast commitment did not falter in the face of developments. Instead, it seems to have been strengthened. We reaffirm our support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and political independence of Lebanon. Lebanese sovereignty must be fully respected, and civilians must be protected in accordance with international law. Mr. President, as the spiral of escalation accelerates, we call for maximum restraint and the protection of civilians and infrastructure. Restraint can be a virtue in times of crisis, and indicative of strength and resolve, not weakness. As the Greek Prime Minister said in his telephone conversations with the leaders of Israel and Lebanon, Greece recognizes the right of Israel to defend itself according to international law. However, further escalation must be avoided, similar to the undertaking of prolonged large-scale military operations in the Lebanese south, which risks plunging the region in more instability and conflict. Full respect of Security Council Resolution 1701 and the ceasefire agreement of 2024 is a prerequisite for stability. As our briefers described, Lebanon is faced with a profound humanitarian challenge. More than 700,000 civilians have been displaced, while dozens are dead and injured, and children are caught in the midst of this chaos. The risk of instability spilling over to the broader region in the form of extensive refugee flows is all too real. According to the International Organization for Migration, some 50,000 Syrians left Lebanon for Syria in the past week alone. Greece is participating in international humanitarian efforts in support of Lebanon and its reconstruction. We stand ready to participate in the conference in support of the Lebanese armed forces in Paris, spearheaded by France and Saudi Arabia, when it takes place. We also continue to assist Lebanon in its efforts to forge strong state institutions, including the LAF. It is a pledge made by the Greek Prime Minister to President Aoun, which has already produced concrete results. These include the recently procured defense material to the Lebanese armed forces to enhance their capabilities. We are committed to continuing our support to the Lebanese armed forces. At the same time, also, in line with the latest communication between our Prime Minister and President Aoun, we remain in constant contact with the competent Lebanese authorities. We are finalizing our contribution to address the grave humanitarian crisis on the ground. Mr. President, Greece condemns the incident resulting in the injury of 3 UNIFIL Ghanaian peacekeepers amidst heavy firing. The safety and security of UN personnel and property must be respected at all times. We call on parties to engage constructively through dialogue and diplomacy, potentially turning a crisis into an opportunity for long-term peaceful coexistence in the region. In this context, we welcome the Lebanese leadership's openness to engage diplomatically with Israel towards a peaceful settlement. In conclusion, as the Greek Prime Minister stated alongside the French and Cypriot presidents in the Republic of Cyprus yesterday, Lebanon, which we fully support, merits a better future, certainly one beyond the plans and purposes of other outside forces. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
President, we thank USG for political and peace-building affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, USG for peace operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, and USG for humanitarian affairs, Tom Fletcher, for the detailed briefing on the situation in Lebanon. We've carefully listened to civil society representatives. President, today's emergency meeting of the Security Council in relation to the latest round of confrontation in Lebanon is taking place in the context of and directly connection with the unprecedented escalation in the Middle East caused by the continued aggression of the U.S. and Israel against Iran. However, our Western partners might try to turn things on their heads and misportray what is happening. It is the American and Israeli military escapade that is plunging the overall region ever deeper into chaos, taking an ever-rising number of human lives and causing irreversible damage to civilian infrastructure. Serious consequences are already being felt by many Middle Eastern countries that we count among our friends. Unfortunately, Lebanon is no exception to this. It has once again suffered large-scale attacks from Israel. It is telling that even before the current escalation, the Israeli leadership had repeatedly and openly threatened Lebanon with a renewal of large-scale military action. Judging by the public statements by representative of the General Staff of the IDF, plans to clear the Lebanese territory had long been in the making. At the same time, the Israelis have been repeatedly violating the agreements of 2024 that were reached with the mediation of the U.S. and France when it comes to withdrawing their contingents to the south of the Blue Line, as well as when it comes to stopping arbitrary attacks and strikes on Lebanon. President, we'd like to emphasize that we have always shared and continue to understand the legitimate concerns of our Israeli partners when it comes to the security of their country. We understand the motivations that caused West Jerusalem to begin their military operation against Lebanon. The military action of March 2nd against Israel and subsequent missile and drone attacks on the central region of Israel could, of course, only lead to extreme alarm and concern. At the same time, we believe that the IDF's response over the past 10 days was disproportionate and excessive. As seen in regular reports from the UN Secretariat, the Israelis are ignoring norms of international humanitarian law conducting strikes against civilian targets, inter alia, which have led to many casualties among the civilian population. Over the past 4 days alone, the Israeli armed forces have attacked more than 60 towns. The disproportionate response of West Jerusalem is clearly demonstrated by the number of casualties of the creeping Israeli invasion. According to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, since March 2nd, about 500 people have died, including 80 children, and the number of wounded is in the hundreds. At the same time, on a near daily basis, the Israeli command is publishing evacuation warnings for densely populated regions of Lebanon, including the southern and capital suburbs, leading to mass panic among local residents. Hundreds of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes and seek shelter. The number of IDPs is estimated at 400 to 800,000 people, which, given the dire socioeconomic situation of Lebanon, will inevitably lead to problems with meeting basic needs, including access to food. President, the continued escalation, besides the dire humanitarian consequences, is jeopardizing the protection and integrity of cultural heritage in Lebanon. During the previous Israeli military campaign, we witnessed the serious damage done to historic monuments of the Arab Republic, including sites in Baalbek and Tyre, which were on the UNESCO World Heritage List. The current Israeli operation has directly affected the Russian Culture House in the city of Nabatea, which is operating jointly with the Russian Development Aid Agency. On March 8th, after a targeted missile strike, the 5-story building of the Russian Culture House was destroyed. We strongly condemn this attack. We view it as an act of military aggression against an institution that was acting solely for humanitarian educational purposes. Lebanese children have long attended classes in that house. No military activities were carried out there. We once again warn that indiscriminate attacks on civilian targets and diplomatic missions in Lebanon are unacceptable. On March 8th, 4 employees of the Iranian embassy in Beirut were killed, and yesterday the Russian General Consulate in Isfahan was struck. This is unacceptable. In addition, attacks on personnel of UNIFIL deployed in the south of the country are unacceptable. In this context, we join the position of the Secretary General of the UN, who on March 6th condemned an incident involving a UNIFIL contingent, as a result of which 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers were wounded. We wish them a speedy recovery and call for unconditional guarantees of the safety of peacekeepers. President, in the current explosive environment, we call on West Jerusalem to refrain from using force in its interactions with Lebanon and to return to upholding its international legal obligations, including under Resolution 1701 of the Security Council. Instead of its destructive, confrontation-oriented policy, it is high time for the Israeli leadership to listen to the position of Beirut, which favors immediate de-escalation and is prepared for direct negotiations with Israel. Equally important in this context is the decision of the Lebanese government itself to strengthen state institutions and to establish control over all parts of the country. For our part, we reiterate our unchanged support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon, as well as the mandate of UNIFIL in accordance with the relevant SC resolutions. We believe that there's no alternative to immediately ceasing hostilities, returning to political and humanitarian efforts, and taking real steps to prevent a broader war in the Middle East. We believe that diplomatic efforts have not yet been exhausted. The parties ought to show political will and to refrain from further violence. These were our aims in preparing the Russian draft resolution in the Security Council on the escalation in the Middle East, distributed a few days ago, which will be examined today in the Council. Our document, unlike the text promoted by our colleagues from Bahrain, is non-confrontational in nature and takes into account the regional dimension of current events, including the suffering of the Lebanese people. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Russia for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. I thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Hafouche for their briefings. The current escalation of fighting in the Middle East is spreading, and the situation between Lebanon and Israel has also sharply intensified. The continuation of hostilities serves the interests of no party. The international community should pool its efforts to promote peace, de-escalate the tensions ASAP so as to restore peace and stability in the region. First, an immediate ceasefire must be promoted to end the fighting. Recently, Hizbullah and Israel has continued to exchange fire. Israel has launched intense attacks on towns in southern Lebanon and on Beirut, expanding its military control over southern Lebanon. These attacks have already resulted in the deaths of more than 570 people, including a large number of women and children. We have noted that Iran's letter to the Security Council stating that 4 Iranian diplomats were killed in the attack. The protection of civilians' armed conflict is a red line under international law. China condemns any attacks against civilians and diplomatic personnel. We call on all parties to cease hostilities, promote de-escalation, and fulfill their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law. Israel should immediately withdraw its troops from Lebanon. We welcome the positive statement by the Lebanese government expressing its commitment to ending the conflict and support safeguarding Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Second, Lebanon should be supported in stabilizing its domestic situation. The heavy shelling has dealt a severe blow to Lebanon's security and stability. More than 700,000 people have been displaced, and already a difficult humanitarian situation has further deteriorated. The international community should increase assistance to Lebanon and support the Lebanese government in stabilizing domestic situation and ensuring the basic livelihood of the people. We have taken note of the decision by the Lebanese parliament to extend its term. We welcome the efforts of the Lebanese government to strengthen governance over the country and hope that all parties in Lebanon will actively engage in political dialogue and properly resolve the differences. Third, the safety of UNIFIL personnel must be effectively ensured. On March the 6th, an attack against UNIFIL injured 3 peacekeepers. China strongly condemns the attack and expresses its sympathies to the injured. Any deliberate attack on UN's peacekeepers constitutes a serious violation of international humanitarian law and Security Council Resolution 1701 and must be firmly opposed and held accountable. The current tensions once again highlights the important role of UNIFIL. China urges all parties to ensure the safety and freedom of movement of UNIFIL personnel so that the mission can effectively carry out its mandate. China stands ready to work with the international community to make unremitting efforts to calm the situation between Lebanon and Israel and to restore peace and stability in Lebanon and the Middle East region. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Mr. President, allow me at the outset to thank France for requesting this important briefing. The Kingdom of Bahrain, Denmark, Greece, Latvia, and the United Kingdom joined this request. I also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Undersecretary General of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Mr. Tom Fletcher, Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, and Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, and Ms. Lynn Harfouch for their important and valuable briefings. I also welcome all permanent representatives with us today. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain deeply regrets the recent dangerous military escalation in the region as a result of the unjustified Iranian attacks, which have targeted my country, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and a number of other brotherly Arab states, in clear violation of the principles of good neighborliness and respect for the sovereignty of states, and in grave breach of international law and the UN Charter. The Kingdom of Bahrain calls upon the Islamic Republic of Iran to immediately cease these hostilities and stop using its proxies and armed militias in the region and beyond. We warn that the continuation of these blatant acts of aggression will lead to further escalation and exacerbate existing tensions, with potentially serious repercussions on regional security and stability. Mr. President, we stress our support for the unity, sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Lebanese Republic. We support efforts to extend Lebanese state authority over all its territory, thereby strengthening its constitutional institutions, preserving security and stability, and fulfilling the aspirations of its brotherly people for a free and dignified life, development, and prosperity. Bahrain also emphasizes the importance of sparing Lebanon the repercussions of regional escalation and rejects any attempts to drag it into ongoing regional conflicts. We welcome the decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers on March 2, 2026, regarding the immediate ban on all security and military activities of Hizbullah and restricting its activities to political and legal work, in addition to the start of the second phase of the plan to impose the monopoly of the Lebanese state and its legitimate institutions on weapons, particularly the Lebanese army and official security forces. We stress that this step is an important development and a sine qua non to promote the sovereignty of the Lebanese state and strengthen its institutions in line with the Lebanese constitution and relevant international resolutions, especially Security Council Resolution 1701 and the Ta'if Agreement. This promotes and strengthens internal stability and promotes the Lebanese state's ability to fulfill its national responsibilities and maintain Lebanon's security and stability. The Kingdom of Bahrain also welcomes the call by His Excellency, the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, to hold direct negotiations with Israel under international auspices to reach an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon. Mr. President, the Kingdom of Bahrain is following with concern the violations of the ceasefire agreement signed between Lebanon and Israel in November 2014, as documented by the UNIFIL. The attacks by Hizbullah on Israel have led to the military escalation in Lebanon, resulting in the displacement of civilians and a worsening of the humanitarian situation. This could have repercussions extending to neighboring countries, further straining their resources and stability. In this context, we stress the need for all parties to adhere to the ceasefire agreement and refrain from any actions that undermine it. We stress that the protection of civilians and the alleviation of human suffering must remain at the heart of joint collaborative efforts. We also emphasize that the safety and security of UN peacekeeping forces is a legal and moral obligation for all parties, and that any attack against them is a clear violation of relevant Security Council resolutions. At the same time, we stress that any gradual withdrawal of UNIFIL forces should be done in a coordinated and responsible manner, ensuring that a security vacuum does not arise in southern Lebanon and that stability is maintained in light of the delicate circumstances in the region. Mr. President, empowering the Lebanese army and strengthening its capabilities is a fundamental pillar for Lebanon's stability and security. We therefore emphasize the importance of providing the necessary support to the Lebanese armed forces to effectively deploy in southern Lebanon and carry out its mandate in preserving Lebanon's sovereignty, security, and stability. We also welcome the French initiative to hold an international conference to support the Lebanese armed forces and internal security forces in April 2026. We also appreciate the efforts of the Lebanese Quintet Committee, namely the United States, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, the Arab Republic of Egypt, and the French Republic in providing political, economic, and security support to Lebanon during this phase. In conclusion, the Kingdom of Bahrain reiterates that the stability and sovereignty of Lebanon represent a shared regional and international interest. We call upon all parties to adhere to the relevant international resolutions, respect the ceasefire agreement, and spare Lebanon and the region further escalation. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Bahrain for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. President. Panama is grateful for the convening of this briefing and also for the information shared by the briefers about the developing situation in Lebanon. We extend our greetings to the representatives of the countries that honor us with their participation. Although in November 2024, a cessation of hostilities was reached, incidents and violations along the Blue Line have continued to be recorded since then, which shows the persistent lack of political will that would be needed to create the conditions conducive to peace. Leaderships that sustain themselves through a logic of permanent confrontation end up dragging their populations into cycles of destruction which leave in their wake devastated cities, displaced families, and generations scarred by war. Panama condemns the attacks launched from Lebanese territory against Israel by Hizbullah, which have forced communities to evacuate and seek shelter. These irresponsible actions are profoundly detrimental to the Lebanese civilian population and also to the refugee communities present in the country, because they have helped unleash a dangerous dynamic of escalation, which has led to an intense military response and to an even greater deterioration of the humanitarian situation. According to recent figures from the Lebanese authorities and humanitarian organizations, more than 700,000 people have been displaced within Lebanon in recent days, while almost 600 people have died. Among them, dozens of children, women, and humanitarian and rescue workers. Many of these families have sought refuge in schools and improvised shelters, which demonstrates the scale of the humanitarian crisis that is underway. Panama calls for the maximum restraint and the immediate cessation of hostilities. We urge the parties to fully comply with their obligations under international law, in particular international humanitarian law, and to adopt all necessary measures to protect the civilian population and infrastructure. Panama reiterates its support for the state and government of Lebanon, whose efforts to preserve internal stability and to strengthen the authority of the state throughout its territory are essential, including the role of the Lebanese armed forces in ensuring that the monopoly and control of arms lies exclusively with the state. We take note of the recent statements by the President of Lebanon, Joseph Aoun, reiterating his country's readiness to resume negotiations with Israel with the aim of stopping the current escalation, and also the measures announced by the Lebanese authorities to restrict the military activities of Hizbullah. We reaffirm our full recognition of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of Lebanon in accordance with its internationally recognized borders. A safe and stable Lebanon, a secure and stable Lebanon with institutions that can fully exercise their authority through the actions that the current governmental administration of Lebanon have been carrying out, is essential for the stability of the entire region. Mr. President, the support of the United Nations to preserve relative stability along the Blue Line in recent decades has been and continues to be essential in order to avoid greater escalations of violence. That notwithstanding, in recent months, the presence of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon has suffered repeated attacks, increasing the risks for personnel and its facilities. We robustly reject these attacks. Last week, 3 blue helmets from the Ghana contingent were wounded while they were within a mission position in the south of Lebanon. Attacks or actions that compromise the security and integrity of the personnel, facilities, and property of the United Nations are unacceptable. Blue helmets that are implementing the mandates of this Council, as well as the positions and infrastructure of the mission, must be respected and protected at all times in accordance with international law. Panama reiterates its firm support and backing for the work of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. We must also recall that that force is in the final phase of its mandate before the planned withdrawal process. And it is precisely for that reason that it is even more important to preserve the conditions of stability on the ground, to ensure the freedom of movement of the mission, and to allow it to fully carry out the tasks entrusted to it by this Council. We reiterate the urgent appeal for the greatest restraint and the immediate cessation of hostilities. President, the current situation once again demonstrates the importance of the full implementation of and compliance with Resolution 1701 of the Security Council. This resolution continues to be the fundamental framework for guaranteeing stability along the Blue Line and for moving towards a lasting solution. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Harfouch for the comprehensive and valuable briefings. Lebanon is a country of remarkable diversity, shaped by layers of civilization and a rich cultural and historical legacy. Its people have long shown resilience in the face of adversity, preserving a vibrant social fabric rooted in coexistence among communities and traditions. Lebanon needs a period of calm to pursue its objectives of peace and stability. The renewed escalation and hostilities are a matter of great concern. They threaten far more than infrastructure. They endanger civilian life and risk reversing the fragile political and security progress Lebanon had begun to make preceding the current crisis. In this context, allow me to make 4 points. First, Pakistan reiterates its full support for the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We condemn in the strongest terms Israel's continued military aggression in southern Lebanon, which has resulted in the death of more than 400 civilians, including at least 83 children and 42 women, and over 600,000 people displaced. Sweeping illegal evacuation orders across large parts of southern Lebanon have deepened civilian suffering. The large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure and the blatant disregard for international humanitarian law must cease immediately. Second, the use of force must remain the exclusive prerogative of the Lebanese state through its legitimate institutions. In this regard, the Lebanese armed forces play a central role, and Pakistan supports efforts to strengthen their capacity and operational effectiveness. Pakistan welcomes the efforts of the government of Lebanon to restore stability and strengthen state authority, including the cabinet decision of 2nd March to reinforce national security structures. We also note Lebanon's de-escalation initiatives, including the 4-point plan advanced by its leadership to restore calm and stability. Third, Pakistan strongly condemns attacks on UN peacekeepers serving with UNIFIL, who have been injured in Israeli strikes. Peacekeepers operating under the UN flag carry out a vital mandate authorized by the Council. Their safety and security must be guaranteed at all times. Fourth, Israeli military activities in southern Lebanon, including the continued presence of forces and the establishment of positions inside Lebanese territory, are illegal and unacceptable. These Israeli actions, which are in contravention of international law, are also undermining the efforts of the government of Lebanon to ensure peace and stability in the country. We call for Israel's immediate, full, and unconditional withdrawal from all occupied Lebanese territories. Sustainable calm requires the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 1701 and unwavering respect for Lebanon's sovereignty and territorial integrity along the Blue Line. Mr. President, we echo the Secretary General's deep concern regarding the regional military escalation since 28th February, which has gravely undermined the November 2024 cessation of hostilities agreement. The situation in Lebanon cannot be viewed in isolation from this broader escalation across the Middle East. Heightened confrontation and unjustified attacks on several brotherly countries, which Pakistan has condemned, have gravely aggravated regional security and stability. At this critical juncture, dialogue and diplomacy must prevail over confrontation. De-escalation, restraint, and renewed diplomatic engagement are urgently required to prevent further deterioration of the regional security environment. Only through sustained political dialogue and respect for international law can the region move towards stability and peace. To conclude, Mr. President, Pakistan stands firmly with the government and people of Lebanon. The international community must take urgent action to prevent further escalation, alleviate human suffering, and support Lebanon's efforts to restore peace and stability across its territory. I thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia.
Mr. President, I thank the United States in their capacity as President of the Security Council for this month for organizing this meeting. I also thank Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Mr. Jean-Pierre Lacroix, Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations, and Mr. Tom Fletcher, Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. We also thank the briefer for her information. Mr. President, official reports and recent news show that the humanitarian situation in Lebanon is delicate. As at the 7th of March, more than 100,000 people were seeking shelter. Since the 2nd of March, almost 1 million people have been displaced within the country. Hundreds of thousands more have been affected by broad evacuation orders. A high number of civilian victims has been recorded, including women and children. There have also been attacks verified against health care facilities, and the safety, security, and life of peacekeeping personnel has been compromised. This demonstrates a crisis that is progressing quickly and which requires an urgent international response. In the past 2 years, we have witnessed how, in this region specifically, the use of force and disdain for international law can affect the lives of millions of people. Colombia expresses its grave concern over the serious escalation seen in recent days in the region, and on the subject of this meeting, by the deterioration of the situation in Lebanon. We urge all of the parties to respect and fully implement Resolution 1701, to exercise maximum restraint, and to guarantee the protection of the civilian population and of United Nations personnel. My country is convinced that it is essential to insist on a return to peaceful means, dialogue, mediation, and the existing dispute settlement mechanisms. They must be used urgently to facilitate a sustained de-escalation and to create the conditions that would make it possible to protect communities on both sides of the Blue Line. At the same time, Colombia wishes to express its solidarity with the Lebanese people and with all of the victims affected by the events of recent weeks. Respect for the sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity of Lebanon is non-negotiable. We reaffirm that full compliance with the United Nations Charter and with the relevant resolutions of the Security Council is crucial. Moreover, we recognize the efforts of the government to maintain effective control over its territory and the steps that have been taken to avoid an escalation of hostilities and to avoid the country being dragged into a broader conflict. Recent decisions by the Lebanese government, including the 4-point plan announced by its president, are signs of the efforts being made to achieve a rapid de-escalation of the situation and to protect its population. As regards the humanitarian dimension, the situation requires immediate and practical measures. It is essential that safe corridors and access for assistance be facilitated, that security guarantees for humanitarian personnel be ensured, and that essential services be restored in areas affected by the hostilities. These actions are preconditions for the effective protection of civilians and for the stabilization of the situation on the ground. We recall that the parties are obliged to respect the relevant principles of international humanitarian law. Strict compliance with those obligations is essential in order to halt the deterioration and to preserve life and human dignity. Mr. President, Colombia condemns any attack on United Nations personnel and emphasizes that the protection of its personnel and the inviolability of its facilities is essential. All parties have the legal and moral obligation to guarantee their security in accordance with international law and with the decisions of the Security Council. Any threat or attack undermines the UN's ability to maintain international peace and security, as well as to verify incidents and to provide humanitarian assistance. We wish to condemn the attack that took place on the 6th of March, and we express our solidarity with the members of the mission that were affected. UNIFIL continues to play an essential role, working with dedication to prevent the escalation of tensions and to protect civilian communities. Colombia reiterates its support and gratitude for the members of the mission, with the understanding that their work in such a complex context is essential. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Colombia for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Liberia, and my own country, Somalia. We thank USG DiCarlo, USG Lacroix, and USG Fletcher for their comprehensive briefings. We also thank Ms. Lynn Harfouch for her valuable contribution. We welcome the participation of the representative of Lebanon in today's meeting. The A3 views the escalation of hostilities in Lebanon since the beginning of March with the utmost gravity and concern. We are deeply alarmed by the mounting toll on human life and the destruction of civilian infrastructure, including densely populated residential areas. Furthermore, as reported by UNICEF, nearly 700,000 people, including 200,000 children, have been forced from their homes, adding to the tens of thousands already uprooted from previous attacks. In that regard, we call for the protection of civilians and full adherence to international humanitarian law and international human rights law. The A3 is also gravely concerned about the March 6th incident against the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, which resulted in injuries to 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers at their position in Al-Ghawza. This is a stark reminder of the perils faced by peacekeepers in Lebanon. The safety and security of United Nations personnel and property are not negotiable. They must be respected at all times and without exception. We wish a swift and complete recovery to all the injured peacekeepers. Mr. President, the A3 reaffirms its unwavering commitment to Lebanon's sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity, and political independence. Lebanon must not become a theater for proxy confrontations or unilateral territorial expansions. Respect for the blue line and the cessation of hostilities by all actors are essential for stability and the full implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. We acknowledge the critical role UNIFIL continues to play in maintaining stability along the blue line. Its presence remains a critical element for the collective efforts to achieving peace in Lebanon and contribute to de-escalation. At the same time, the A3 underscores the importance of enhancing the capacity of the Lebanese armed forces to assume full responsibility for the defense of Lebanese territory. We urge the international community to intensify its support, including equipment, materials, and financial assistance to ensure their effective and sustainable deployment south of the Litani River. To conclude, Mr. President, the A3 calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities and an urgent return to the parameters of the 2024 ceasefire agreement. We emphasize that a renewed commitment to Resolution 1701 remains the primary framework for long-term stability. It's imperative that all parties prioritize dialogue and diplomacy over kinetic action to prevent a full-scale regional conflagration. Achieving a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East is only viable through genuine commitment to diplomacy in accordance with international law and the UN Charter. We stand in solidarity with the people of Lebanon, and we urge this Council to act with unity and resolve to restore peace and uphold international law. I thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Somalia for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. I add my thanks and appreciation to all of our briefers today. Colleagues, the United States condemns the attacks that Hizbullah, a longtime proxy of the Iranian regime, has launched against Israel. Hezbollah has yet again made it clear that it does not represent nor does it defend the people of Lebanon. It defends the interest of the Iranian regime. It is nothing more than a proxy and, frankly, an obstacle to Lebanon becoming a peaceful, stable, and functioning state, something I think we all would like to see and encourage. We recognize Israel's legitimate security needs and its right to defend itself from the Iranian regime and Hezbollah, which are two sides of the same coin. And we ask all of you, we ask our colleagues, how long will the world continue to tolerate the Iranian regime as the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, sowing havoc around the world as it seeks to export its so-called revolution? I ask you, what country can legitimately say it's better off or more stable because of Iranian influence over the decades? Yemen? No. Lebanon? No. Syria? Absolutely not. Iraq? No. They're all trying to rid themselves of this cancer that has spread over the decades, this disease of instability and chaos. Thankfully, the United States and this administration is taking bold action to do just that. But to the end of ridding itself of this violence, death, and destruction, the United States welcomes the absolutely historic, and we should recognize it for what it is. We welcome the March 2nd decision of the Lebanese Council of Ministers to immediately prohibit Hezbollah's military and security activities. We applaud them. As the government of Lebanon said in its letter to this council on March 2nd, these activities, the activities of Hezbollah, disregard the will of the majority of the Lebanese people. In fact, it's endangering them. That statement is an absolutely historic milestone on the road to ending Hezbollah's long and destructive influence in Lebanon. The next milestone is implementation, and Lebanon's security services must enforce this policy and prosecute those who violate it. Now is the time for the government of Lebanon to take back control of the entirety of its country. The United States absolutely supports that endeavor and that mission. We urge our friends in Lebanon to not let this moment slip away. Our message is clear: take your country back. And we are all too happy to apply the time and treasure necessary to do that. The United States also commends the actions of the Lebanese government to expel Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which has undermined Lebanese sovereignty for decades and provides oxygen, provides money, provides weapons to Hezbollah's terrorist plots in Lebanon and across the globe. The world must now come together in supporting Lebanon's efforts. The world must come together now in supporting Lebanon's efforts to exercise its sovereignty across every inch of Lebanese territory. The United States stands with the Lebanese people who were dragged into yet another war by Hezbollah at the behest of Iran. We are responding to the civilian consequences of this recklessness by providing immediate, life-saving humanitarian assistance to hundreds of thousands of now displaced Lebanese. Since 2012, The United States has provided more than $4.4 billion in humanitarian assistance to support Lebanon. And we commend the many humanitarians on the ground who are aiding in this effort. We also express our hopes for the full recovery for the UNIFIL peacekeepers who were recently injured. Peacekeepers take on exceptional risks in these conflict zones for the advancement of peace and security. We recognize that, and we call on all parties to respect the safety and security of these men and women as they assume this important role. Colleagues, the international community must unite in supporting the Lebanese government and our Israeli partners in the full implementation of Resolution 1701. I think we've seen real progress in that regard. This council must condemn all acts that undermine Resolution 1701, and the way forward involves the international community standing firmly in support of Lebanon's efforts to exercise its territorial sovereignty and restore state authority. And we will continue to work alongside partners to create lasting peace and security in Lebanon. I thank you. I will resume my function as President of the Council, and I give the floor to the representative of Lebanon for his statement.
Mr. President, at the outset, I thank you for convening this emergency session at the request of the French Republic, supported by the United Kingdom, Greece, Denmark, Latvia, and the Kingdom of Bahrain. I also thank Ms. DiCarlo, Mr. Lacroix, Mr. Fletcher, and Ms. Harfouch for the briefings they provided. Mr. President, we meet today at a moment when Lebanon finds itself trapped in a war that it did not choose between Israel and Hizbullah. Israel, which shows no respect for the laws of war and persists in its attacks on Lebanon, and Hizbullah, whose military and security activities have been banned and deemed illegal by the Council of Ministers. Once again, we are confronted with a painful reality that serves neither Lebanon nor the Lebanese people, who are facing death, devastation, and displacement. The number of Lebanese displaced has reached nearly 1 million, many of whom without shelters befitting human dignity. Every morning, we wake up to new casualties among innocent people, including women and children, and to warnings to evacuate entire areas and destruction of both private and public property. This creates extremely difficult conditions for the Lebanese government, which is striving to put Lebanon back on the path of recovery and reform and to rebuild its institutions. Mr. President, we wish to highlight that the Lebanese government has clearly expressed its full rejection and condemnation of the rocket attack claimed by Hezbollah on the 2nd of March. As we informed you in our letter on that same day, our government affirmed that this attack contradicts its decisions regarding the exclusive authority of the Lebanese state over matters of war and peace, and contradicts the principle of refusing to drag Lebanon into the ongoing regional war. This act also constitutes a violation of the cabinet's resolutions and aims at undermining the credibility of the Lebanese state. Mr. President, in our modern history, no Lebanese government has demonstrated this level of courage and determination to reclaim the state authority, to restrict weapons to legitimate state institutions, and to extend the state's control exclusively through its own forces over all Lebanese territory in implementation of the Ta'if Agreement, which stipulated the dissolution of all Lebanese and non-Lebanese militias and the handover of their weapons to the Lebanese state, and to extend the state authority over all its territories, and in implementation of relevant international resolutions, including 1701 and an implementation of the government's ministerial declaration and related decisions, particularly the decision adopted on the 5th of August 2025. We recall that on the 2nd of March, the government issued a decision requiring the immediate prohibition of all Hezbollah military and security activities, deeming them illegal and compelling Hezbollah to hand over its weapons to the Lebanese state and to confine its work exclusively to political activity within constitutional and legal frameworks. On the 5th of March, the Lebanese government adopted an additional decision tasking the security institutions with verifying the presence of members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Lebanon and deporting them immediately upon identification. Another decision was issued requiring prior authorization for issuing entry visas to Iranian nationals seeking to visit Lebanon. Mr. President, we will not accept a return to the past. The Lebanese people do not want war, and the Lebanese government is moving forward in implementing its decisions and will not backtrack. However, our priority today is to stop this war, to protect our country and ensure the security and safety of our people. It is our right to live in peace and security in our homeland and our region. To this end, the Lebanese government has expressed its readiness to enter into negotiations with Israel under international auspices with civilian participation to settle all outstanding issues. The President of the Republic called on the international community 2 days ago to support him and to implement the initiative he announced, consisting of the following: establishing a full truce, including a complete halt to all Israeli ground, naval, and air attacks on Lebanon. Second, expediting the provision of essential logistical support to the Lebanese armed forces. And third, enabling the Lebanese armed forces to take control of areas of tension, confiscate all weapons found there, and seize Hezbollah's arms and depots and warehouses in accordance with the available information. Fourth, simultaneously, Lebanon and Israel would begin direct negotiations under international auspices to implement all of the above. Mr. President, in support of the Lebanese government's efforts, this esteemed council is called upon to compel Israel to implement Resolution 1701, to respect the cessation of hostilities, to withdraw fully to internationally recognized borders, to end its repeated violations and breaches of Lebanese sovereignty, to release Lebanese detainees, to cease its threats to Lebanon's territorial integrity and political independence within its internationally recognized borders. We reaffirm Lebanon's attachment to the follow-up mechanism established under the Cessation of Hostilities Declaration pursuant to Resolution 2790. We also reiterate Lebanon's commitment to the truce agreement signed with Israel on the 3rd of March 1949, which is in the interest of both parties. Mr. President, we must also reiterate our condemnation of Iran's deliberate and unjustified attacks targeting the Gulf Cooperation Council states, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Iraq, and Syria. We express our full solidarity with these countries. We also condemn the attacks targeting Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Cyprus. We strongly denounce these reprehensible acts which Lebanon rejects unequivocally and without reservation. We also condemn the attacks against the UNIFIL from any source. We renew our gratitude to the UNIFIL, to the troop contributing countries, and to all personnel serving within this force, especially those who lost their lives in Lebanon in service of international peace and security. We strongly condemn the targeting of the Ghanaian battalion headquarters and express full solidarity with Ghana and UNIFIL's command, wishing the injured a swift recovery. Finally, Mr. President, Lebanon is facing an extremely dangerous moment and a true humanitarian catastrophe. While we work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our people and meet their basic humanitarian needs, any support or assistance to help ease the burden of this crisis is welcome and greatly appreciated. We reiterate once again that
Lebanon will not accept to be turned into an arena for settling scores. We will continue striving to lead our nation out of this ordeal stronger and more resilient. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I would like to congratulate the United States for taking the presidency for the month of March, and I also would like to thank the briefers. Mr. President, since the 2nd of March, Hizbullah has launched wave after wave of attacks against Israel. More than 880 rockets and missiles, more than 60 UAVs, more than 15 anti-tank guided missiles. Hizbullah itself has been clear about why, and I quote, to avenge the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, not to defend Lebanon, not to protect Lebanese citizens, but to serve the agenda of the Iranian regime. Just days ago, they vowed to fight to the last breath. As we sit here today, Israeli families are running to bomb shelters as Hizbullah launches new attacks toward our communities. That is the reality we face. That is why Israel is now operating in Lebanon to stop this threat. Mr. President, to understand where we are today, we must look at what has happened since October 7th. For years, Hizbullah grew into one of the most powerful non-state armed organizations in the world. It began way back in the 80s, when Lebanon was in the middle of a civil war. But over time, it became something more dangerous, a proxy army built by Iran, funded by Iran, trained by Iran, armed by Iran. By 2024, Hizbullah had between 150,000 and 200,000 rockets and missiles. Think about that. The largest arsenal ever held by a non-state actor. Think about your countries. Most of your countries do not have the capacity of 200 missiles and rockets. A war machine built over decades with one purpose, Israel's destruction. After Hamas's October 7th attacks, Hizbullah opened a second front from Lebanon. For months, Israel's northern communities came under fire. Rockets, drones, missiles launched across the border. We responded. Israel responded with targeted operations against Hizbullah's command networks and military infrastructure. I want to remind you that during that operation, senior leadership was eliminated, including their leader, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, a terrorist with blood on his hands. Command structures were disrupted. Around 3,000 fighters from the Radwan force were taken off the battlefield. They lost roughly 80% of its rockets capability. The army Iran spent decades building, we broke it. But Hizbullah was not fully eliminated. We have to admit it. Instead of stepping back after the ceasefire, it rearmed, restocked, it rebuilt, and it did so with the help of the Iranian regime. During the first year after the ceasefire, Iran funneled more than $1 billion to Hizbullah. It continues to receive over $50 million every month to rebuild its military machine. Tehran funds it, Tehran arms it, Tehran directs it. Hizbullah pulls the trigger, but the Ayatollahs in Tehran pull the strings. All of this in direct violation of Security Council Resolution 1701. Mr. President, that resolution required the area between the Blue Line and the Litani River to be free of Hizbullah weapons and terrorists. You all voted on this resolution. I want to show you this map, which shows launch sites used by Hizbullah to fire rockets, missiles, and drones toward Israel. You know, look where they are. All those dots are south of the Litani River. Hizbullah should not be there. And from these locations, on the first day of these attacks, Hezbollah launched missiles toward Israel. You know, one of the village here, the village of Bargoz, small village, we have the intel about it. When they send a missile from those areas, southern of the Litani, it takes 30 seconds for the missile to land in Israel, in the northern part of Israel. 30 seconds. Imagine for a minute that you are driving with your family in your car, and you hear the sirens, and you have 30 seconds. You have to stop the car, you have to look for a shelter, and you have to decide which child you take first to the shelter if you cannot carry all of them. 30 seconds, that's what it takes. Mr. President, since the ceasefire came into effect, Israel has submitted 929 enforcement requests asking the Lebanese armed forces to dismantle Hezbollah infrastructure, launch sites, weapons depots, underground bunkers. However, the efforts of the Lebanese armed forces were not sufficient. Sites that were identified were not dismantled. Sometimes they came there, they took the pictures, and that was it. And today Hezbollah continues to fire rockets at Israel from those same areas. Last August, the Lebanese government instructed its military to prepare a plan to disarm armed militias in the country. We welcomed that decision. It was a momentous step. We also commend the recent statements of Prime Minister Salam declaring Hezbollah's current military activity against Israel illegal. Those are the right words, but the reality on the ground tells a different story. So I ask the Lebanese government, if Hezbollah is being dismantled, where is the evidence? Where are the operations against their launch sites? Where are the seizures of their weapons? Where is your military? Ambassador Arafa, Lebanon now stands at a pivotal moment in its history. The time has come to decide. Will Lebanon stick to declarations or actually act? Because the question before you is very simple. Who controls Lebanon? The Lebanese government or Hezbollah, acting on behalf of the Ayatollahs in Tehran? Lebanon has a national army of more than 72,000 soldiers. Mobilize them, train them, empower them with the authority and resources to assert the sovereignty of the Lebanese state. We support peaceful negotiations. You know that. We spoke before the last operation. But today, as we speak, there are only two options on the table. Either the Lebanese government takes real action to restrain Hezbollah, or Israel will use its strengths to dismantle this terrorist organization. There are no other options. You know, we can meet and talk in Akora, wherever you want, but not while Hezbollah is sending missiles into Israel. So Israel is acting. In recent days, the IDF has struck Hezbollah command centers and military infrastructure across southern Lebanon. The IDF has also carried out strikes against assets of Al-Qard al-Qassam network, Hezbollah's financial system used to fund its terrorist activity and rebuild its military capabilities. We have issued evacuation notices to protect Lebanese civilians because we face an enemy that deliberately places them in harm's way. Hezbollah hides behind civilians in Lebanon and firing at civilians in Israel. Mr. President, believe me, Israel does not want to be operating inside Lebanon. But Israel will not accept rockets fired at our people. As we speak, the Iranian regime is losing. And like many failing regimes, it is lashing out at its neighbors across the region, indiscriminately attacking civilians. You will meet at 3 p.m. to discuss that. And its proxy Hezbollah is doing exactly the same to Israel. Many countries in our region have drawn the right conclusion. They are distancing themselves from Tehran, strengthening their defenses, protecting their sovereignty. Lebanon now faces that same choice. Israel will continue confronting the terror network built by Tehran, and we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that rackets and terror can no longer threaten our people. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative for Israel for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank you for holding this important meeting. We also thank the Permanent Mission of France for its request to hold this emergency meeting alongside other countries. I would also like to thank briefers. The Syrian Arab Republic is concerned by the dangerous escalation in the region with its grave political, security, and economic repercussions, including on the brotherly country of Lebanon, its people, and its infrastructure. Syria reaffirms its support to the safety and security of Lebanon. We denounce the escalation and the bombing of Lebanon, as it will hinder the role of the Lebanese state to implement its functions and responsibilities, including its efforts to disarm Hizbullah. We also warn of the repercussions of the current conflict, which, if it continues, could expand in a way that contradicts the interest of Lebanon and the region, especially as this conflict coincides with repeated Israeli violations of Syria's sovereignty through aerial violations and ground incursion into Syria's territory and the occupation of new territory since the 8th of December 2024. We also welcome in this regard, Mr. President, and we thank the efforts of the United States, led by President Trump, for its role to mediate to resolve this issue. Mr. President, Syria rejects the policies of displacing civilians under the threat of bombing and destruction, as this has grave humanitarian repercussions on Lebanon and Syria, and they will be difficult to contain. Moreover, Syria welcomes the decision of the Lebanese government to reject any military or security activities from Lebanon outside the legal state's institutions. This same decision bans Hezbollah's security and military activities and compels Hezbollah to hand over its weapons to the Lebanese state in order to consecrate the state's monopoly on weapons and strengthen its sovereignty over its territory. Mr. President, since the fall of the former regime and to this day, Syria and Lebanon have adopted a new approach in their bilateral relations based on mutual respect and common interest. As a result, a number of official visits between the two countries were held to discuss political and technical issues. His Excellency, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, yesterday made a phone call with His Excellency, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun, to discuss the current regional developments and their repercussions on the security and stability of the region. Both sides stressed the importance of maintaining the security and safety of both countries. President al-Shara expressed his support to the efforts of President Aoun to disarm Hezbollah and to spare the region the repercussions of the current conflict. Both sides reaffirmed the importance of coordination and cooperation between Syria and Lebanon to maintain the security and safety of both countries and their people, and to prevent any attempts to sow discord and destabilize the region. President al-Shara expressed his support to serious steps taken by the governments of Iraq and Lebanon to protect their countries and prevent any descent towards the conflict. We are convinced that Syria is affected by the direct and dangerous repercussions of this escalation. We believe that Syria's stability is a cornerstone for the stability of the Levant and the region. Therefore, we strengthened our defense forces along the borders with Lebanon and Iraq as a precautionary measure to prevent any spillover of this conflict to Syria's territory and to confront and combat cross-border organizations, to prevent them from using Syria's territory to implement their foreign agendas in a way that runs counter with the interest of the Syrian people and the people of neighboring countries. Mr. President, Syria condemns in the strongest terms all forms of the ongoing Iranian attacks against the security and stability of the Arab Gulf countries and Jordan and Iraq. We stand in full solidarity with these countries that are subjected to these wanton attacks by Iran. We call for respecting their sovereignty and territorial integrity. My country also denounces all Iranian statements and procedures on the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as this jeopardizes the freedom of navigation and international trade, in addition to the energy supplies that impact most countries of the world. Syria calls for de-escalation and for supporting the diplomatic track, as this current escalation is an existential threat for the entire region. It jeopardizes the global economic stability. Syria reaffirms its full and continued support to all efforts to strengthening stability in the region, to give precedence to dialogue and peaceful settlement to resolve the issues of the region and guarantee security and stability for all countries in the region. We also call on the Security Council to compel Israel to end its attacks against Lebanon and the Lebanese people. We reaffirm the unity and territorial integrity of Lebanon. We reaffirm the important role of the Lebanese armed forces as the guarantor of the security and stability of Lebanon. We also reaffirm the importance of preserving the safety of UNIFIL personnel in Lebanon and UNDOF in Syria. We denounce the attack against UNIFIL last Friday, which injured 3 peacekeepers. In conclusion, Mr. President, in solidarity with our brethren in the Arab Gulf countries and Jordan, Syria has co-sponsored the draft resolution before the Security Council tabled by the Kingdom of Bahrain on their behalf, which condemns the unjustified Iranian attacks and that calls for their end immediately. We call on all member states in your council to vote in favor of this resolution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Syria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me first to congratulate you for the assumption of the presidency of this council and to thank the briefers for their updates. Madam President, Cyprus is a UN and EU member state most closely connected to the region, and Lebanon is not a distant issue for us. President Christodoulidis, also as Cyprus holds the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union, has been in constant touch with President Aoun as regards the escalating situation. We call on all parties to exercise utmost restraint. Civilians must always be protected, and international humanitarian law must always be respected as well. We condemn the attacks carried out by Hizbullah against Israel following the former's decision to align with the Iranian attacks. At the same time, while Israel has the right to self-defense in line with international law, we are concerned about the intensification of military operations which have caused mass displacement. Cyprus is steadfast in its support for Lebanon's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We therefore welcome the recent decision of the Lebanese government to prohibit military and security activities and to disarm Hezbollah. We also welcome the public statements of the Lebanese Foreign Minister Raghi, who conveyed his strong condemnation of the reported drone attacks that may have originated from Lebanese territory towards the island of Cyprus. Strengthening state authority across the entire territory of Lebanon is essential. The monopoly on legitimate force must rest solely with the Lebanese armed forces. Cyprus has long supported the Lebanese armed forces and will continue to do so as a strategic priority. We will continue providing training and financial assistance, including through our participation in the Military Technical Committee for Lebanon. The full implementation of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 remains essential for restoring stability along the Blue Line. Cyprus condemns the attacks against UNIFIL and reiterates its strong support to the force and its mandate. Allow me also to express our solidarity with the Ghanaian government whose contingent was attacked. UNIFIL peacekeepers' safety and security must be ensured at all times. Diplomacy remains the best path forward to lasting de-escalation. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Cyprus for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers, and the meeting is adjourned.